There's a new name on the draft block for potential future Blue Jackets, and this one might be the most exciting of them all. Today, we're talking about Berkly Catton on Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen today every single day. And you can find Locked On Blue Jackets on any podcast app of choice, on YouTube, and on SiriusXM. I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Visit Make Every Moment More, because right now new customers are going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. So earlier today, we talked about the Blue Jackets' kind of recent run of play with the game against the Blackhawks, the game against the Carolina Hurricanes, and the game against the Rangers. So I thought I'd bring you a little bit of bonus content, I guess. So I've got another draft profile with Sam McGilligan of Scouting and Puck Preps, and we're talking about Berkly Catton, who is fast moving up a lot of people's draft boards, mine included. So I'm just going to get right into it because Sam is much smarter than I am. The thing about kind of where the Blue Jackets are in the draft rankings right now is that there are so many different players, and I've talked about this with a bunch of different guys. Who do you take kind of in that 2 to 5 range? And this is a name that has kind of been gaining more and more ground among the scouting circles, I feel like. So I've got Sam McGilligan of Puck Preps and the Scouting Show back to talk a little bit about Berkly Catton, who is doing just truly disgusting things in the WHL this season. So let's jump straight in. What the heck is up with Berkly Catton?
He is sick as hell. That is what is up. Berkly Catton is a monster of a player. He's probably the most consistent viewing in the entire draft. There is no such thing as a bad Berkly Catton game. There are Macklin Celebrini games where you're like, whoa. And there are Ivan Demidov games where you're like, whoa. And same with Lindstrom and all the other top guys. And there are also games, maybe less so with Celebrini, but with the others where you're like, all right, yeah, well, that's we got to iron those kinks out of the game, but all together still solid. Celebrini has ones where you're just like, this was good, and it just kind of wasn't working out for him. But I don't feel like I've ever had this with Berkly Catton yet. Berkly Catton legitimately is just monstrous. Every single game, he's just this overwhelming presence on the ice that is really difficult to kind of deal with, considering how smart he is.
Yeah, I went to look at what his point totals were, because the WHL, I feel like, of the 3 major junior leagues, is the hardest one to score in. And so I was like, I'll just go see how many points he has. And he just has a casual 89 points in 54 games. 41 of those are goals. That just has him on pace for 112 points.
He's got an insane level of production this year while driving an insane amount of his team's production himself. And I believe he's on an uptick of a notable extent. In the last month and a half, 6 to 8 weeks, his scoring has improved. So he's probably, if he keeps up on the second half of the pace, the pace of the second half of his season so far, and not the first half, he'd score more than 112. He's spectacular.
Yeah, I'm looking at the WHL scoring right now, and unless I'm missing someone, I'm all the way into. Oh, I found the second place scorer on the team is at 73rd in the league. Berkly Catton is currently 5th in the league. The only guys above him are, a couple of draft picks: Riley Height, Jagger Thurkus, Zach Funk, and Gabe Klassen. Those are the only guys that have more points than Berkly Catton right now.
He has
more points than Andrew Giselle.
Yeah, he does. He's
what's going on?
Well, what's going on is that he's just quite literally 2 to 3. He's an NHL brain already, without question, with everything he needs to just dismantle WHL players on a regular basis, playing in the WHL. Like, without question, and I don't mean NHL brain like someone who's just like kind of I mean, like, he's an NHL like top 6 brain. He's one of those players that when he does finally play in the NHL, the adjustment period will just be like, oh, they move slightly faster during this play, and this is no longer an option for me unless I do this. I better learn to start doing that. Like, those types of adjustment habits, not like, whoa, this is so fast, I'm really struggling to keep up. Like, I can't mentally process everything as fast as I need to be. Because that won't be happening with Berkly Catton, because this is never probably going to happen to him for the rest of his life. He just does not have the capacity to underthink the game. Or sorry, that almost comes across detrimental. Like, he does not have the ability to not process the game at the highest level, is where I will rephrase that too. He is sensational. The decision making is, the amount of times I've seen him do something where I'm in his position where I'm like, wait, is he about to make a mistake? Then he pulls out some play that I did not see as a possibility. I could see 3 plays coming out. None of them were this one, and this was by far the best option of the 4. Where it's just like, wow. It's happened at least once a game, but I'd say probably happens 2 to 3 times a game. He draws in pressure better than just about any player in the draft. This is how he does it. He's just a pressure drawing machine. He already understands all the variables around the ice around him. So whether his teammates are playing close, whether they're playing far, whether he has a numbers advantage, whether there's pressure coming at him from angling towards him from behind and there's a defender in front of him, he's aware of all of these situations. And he always goes into it knowing, I can do this and they will do that, and I can do X and they will do Y. And just like, he seems to get, it's almost like a computer gets it. Like, I hate the whole like, he's got great hockey IQ thing, because it's so typical. But in this case, I feel like it's just for ease of explanation. His hockey IQ is through the roof. There's nothing he doesn't see coming. It's so rare that he's caught off guard, and it's so rare that he doesn't have a solution to a problem unfolding in front of him. Makes the life of his teammates so much easier, to the point where sometimes I'm like, his teammates just are not reading the opportunities he's giving them. Like, he's that good at making things better for them that they can't process it fast enough and the timing windows close. He's great, man.
Is he a guy that's going to challenge for the NHL in October? Or is he a guy that is going to go back to Spokane and just make teams cry?
He should go back to Spokane, probably. But here's what I'll say. I would have said Benson would do surprisingly well, but should probably go back, and look where he's at. I don't think they're direct comparables, Benson, but the whole, like, they're so smart about the way they play the game is a comparable.
I did immediately think about Zack Benson when you were talking about kind of his level of process.
Like, I don't think that they're necessarily comparable players. The more I keep watching Berkly Catton, the more I see him as a better version of a player I absolutely adored 2 years ago in Noah Östlund, who has developed unbelievably well. And when I saw him in the SHL this year, I was like, wow, holy crap, this guy has gotten unbelievably well, or unbelievably good. Like, he's sensational. And Berkly Catton is kind of like the less physically developed, because, you know, he's 2 years younger, but kind of even better at executing the same style of plays that Östlund is going for. The way he draws players in and then just slips out of that space, head up, already aware of all of his options are, and he'll come out of slipping by one guy. Another defender could be right there ready to drape all over him, and he's just like heads up, faking him one way, and then leads that guy another way. And then it's just like 2 defenders beat with tons of space left. His timing on passes, like, he knows just when he needs to accelerate, when he needs to remain at his current pace, when he needs to slow down, when he needs to blend them, when he needs to fake an angle change, anything. He can just toy with defenders in all these different ways that none of them, you almost can't pick up on a pattern. It's just, he's reading you so well that whatever you think is the play to make, he thinks you're going to make that play. It's almost like the guy's leading a bull around with the red flag. I'm blanking on the name.
Predators.
Thank you. He's kind of like that almost. It's just cruel the way he can toy with the fences. And it's really hard to not see him thriving in the NHL.
In a minute, we're going to talk more about Berkly Catton, but first, I've got to tell you about GameTime because you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets for the next big event, and you don't if you go with GameTime. They are the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theatre events near you. You've got killer last-minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and a best price guarantee. If you find seats in the same section and row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. They're taking the guesswork out of buying tickets. I just spent a bunch of time in San Jose, and I went to a couple of games while I was there, and GameTime is the only app I use for this. You can do it in literally 2 seconds. You just open the app, find the game, click the seats, done. And it's great. There's no secret fees like some other ticketing apps that we won't mention, and they've got deals on tickets right up to the start of the event or even an hour after it starts. So if you're looking for last-minute tickets, your plans got cancelled, and you're like, hey, I'm going to go check out the Blue Jackets, you can do that on GameTime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKED ON for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. What's his NHL ceiling? Is he a top 6 guy? Top
I
guy?
like one of the only high-end, smaller 5'9", 5'10" NHL centers, but like without question, I see this guy as like a second-line center at least. But honestly, like first line is absolutely possible. Like it's just the only thing you're betting against right here, like the odds, because how often do you see 5'9" first-line centers? As Catton 5'9" or 5'10"? Do you have this in front of you by any chance?
He is 5'11" according to Elite Prospect, so I assume that means he's probably like 5'8", 5'9".
I'm mixing up his height with Misa's because we just talked about Misa.
Yeah.
But you're right. I thought he was 5'10".
Definitely a sub 6 foot.
Yeah, he's
center,
5'10",
which is rare.
Okay, never mind. I take this back. Without question, it's so much easier to say first line center because there was like the size bias was basically where I was coming from. Like, yeah, he'll have to fight against that, but he's good enough. Never mind all that. At 5'10", yeah, or 5'11" especially if he's 5'11", although I didn't know he reached that point. He is first line center caliber player. I wouldn't like bet my life on it, but I would say he's a top 6 center almost like for sure.
So the concept of like a Fantilli Catton 1-2 down the middle is
extremely enticing.
Yes.
Like extremely, extremely, extremely enticing.
I hate to compare players kind of in the same draft because I think that that's not necessarily a useful thing to do, but someone else that we've kind of been looking at as that potential kind of 1A, 1B with Fantilli is Kaden Lindstrom, also playing in the WHL. Which way would, if you've got the option, which way are you going? Are you taking Catton or are you taking Lindstrom?
I'm taking Berkly Catton. I still like Lindstrom enough to the point where we can have a serious conversation about it. And like, even by year's end, I don't think, like, I'm pretty sure Celebrini, Demidov, Catton is like locked in at my top 3 almost at this point, just because like I'm giving Kaden Lindstrom every chance to knock into it. And he's close, but he's not really convincing me enough. Lindstrom has warts in his game that you don't see with Catton. Like with Lindstrom, a lot of things, I wouldn't say a lot of things, but he can be selfish, not selfish, but self-centered almost. I feel like that's a slightly kinder way of phrasing it as a player sometimes, where he'll forego obvious passes that would just make sense for both him, for his own benefit, like pass it and work a give and go with this player. Please, for the love of Christ, he's right there and he's open and he's like matching your pace beside you. And he'll kind of ignore them. Sometimes he'll just drive into traffic sometimes, but he also has like gifted skating, especially in terms of like his agility and like being able to turn off a pressure. Unbelievably long reach. Like he's 6'5", booming shot. Like he's got a lot of things that work really well for him. So Lindstrom's the higher upside player. But the way I don't know if I ever see Kaden Lindstrom being the type of player who just elevates everybody around him the way Berkly Catton does. Like, I just don't think that's in Kaden Lindstrom's game, and it's not who you want him to be or why you take him. So it's like, if you want your second line center for Columbus to be the one who just everybody plays with them and they're always better and he's doing everything right. He plays defense well. He moves the puck well up the ice. He back checks well. He plays on the cycle well, forechecks well. He rushes, he attacks off the rush well. He supports his line mates. He's basically gifted off puck in terms of always being in the right spot. And he just rarely makes a decision that has you pulling your hair out. You're going Berkly Catton. If you want the highlight reel machine that will bulldoze through like multiple defenders with insane skill and just like kind of do things that few players in the league can do, you take Kaden Lindstrom and acknowledge the fact that he might not be the guy who ends up playing in that spot. He might end up being a better winger than he is a center. I think other people who probably view it the other way around, but I think that's mostly just because of Catton's height. Like, the way people talk about Berkly Catton makes me forget that he's 5'10", 5'11". Like, the way he's talked about, like he's some 5'8", 5'9" forward who plays center. And it kind of drives me insane sometimes when I'm watching him, because I'm like, why should I be concerned about his size? I don't see any reason to. Where people can, no, they're not stylistic comparisons whatsoever, but like, were you concerned about Cole Caulfield's size when he was just completely torching everybody when he was on the NTDP? No, because it was pretty obvious he was going to be a rock star. And it's one of those ones where I'm watching Catton, like, it's pretty obvious. Like, there's something wrong with me almost if you don't become a really good player at this point. Like, I'm completely convicted in it. He's amazing.
We'll finish up my conversation with Sam about Berkly Catton in just a second, but first, I've got to tell you all about FanDuel. Get buckets for your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers are going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. $150 if your bet wins. So if I was you, I might put some money on, I don't know, Cole Sullivan just scoring a goal, because he's doing that a lot recently. And if you win, you're going to get $150 that you can spend on literally anything on FanDuel. They've got quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA, and also us, the Locked On Podcast Network. It feels again like a very Blue Jackets pick of.
Yeah, he does.
Let's just take this guy, throw him in the NHL, and see what happens. And obviously there's like development that needs to happen, but
it sounds based on the little that NHL we've heard through like Bob McKenzie and them, it doesn't seem like Catton is like a top 5 or 6 guys in the NHL's eyes. Maybe this changes by year's end. You'd have thought Zack Benson would be the one, though. Like, Benson was everything an NHL team would dream about, and he went 13th.
Yeah.
13th.
McKenzie has him at 10th right now, Catton, which seems low.
Okay. To me, it seems extremely low. Like, I cannot argue. The only player I can kind of argue above Catton is Kaden Lindstrom, but not very well. And it doesn't last very long before like I start poking that Lindstrom argument full of holes, and then go back to now. I just watch a single Berkly Catton game, and you just go, yeah, no way, not a chance. He's
so
the one. Yeah.
Does he immediately jump to the top of the Blue Jackets depth for prospects? If we take like Fantilli, Johnson, guys that have played NHL games already, if we take those guys,
he immediately would be number
jump
one.
to the top.
Honestly, you could keep Juracek and Johnson in there, and he still has a number 1 contention spot. I don't know if I'd say it over Juracek. I love David Juracek, though. So like, that's not a slight against Berkly Catton. That's more so just like, what a ridiculous 1-2 to have. But he's like, if you want to say like the Juracek and Johnson tier, he's without question in that. Like, I like Berkly Catton more than I like Ken Johnson. I like Berkly Catton about as much as I like David Juracek. They're just such opposite styles of play. One's like a yeehaw, full aggression defender, and the other's like a tactile genius center with both have insane amounts of offensive upside too.
Yeah, I think what I've done is I've talked myself into the concept of a Kent Johnson, Berkly Catton, Gavin Brindley second line for the next 10 years. And that sounds like a real fun time. For
Berkly
me,
Catton
also
and Brindley would do a lot of good stuff together. Berkly Catton and Ken Johnson, actually. I feel like Brindley with Fantilli and then just keeping Johnson and Catton together and then throw Sillinger on the wing or something like that. Like those
many options.
Yeah, lots of good options.
Let's finish up with I was going to ask you about surprise depth picks in the upcoming draft, but I think instead what I want to talk about just for a little bit is we've talked a little bit over this episode and the last one we recorded about Blue Jackets prospect rankings. Is there anyone in there that has like leapt up the rankings since being drafted that like you're like, oh hey, this dude has turned into a rock star without me even noticing? I know we talked a little bit about like Luca Pinelli. I don't know if he's
Pinelli. Well, we liked Pinelli, right? Like I was definitely somebody who was on the Pinelli train, so I wouldn't necessarily say it in that sense. But for the sake of where you're coming from, Luca Pinelli is absolutely one of them. Like he's one of those ones where people might be looking around and going like, well, I mean, it's early to make the call, but like, why did he fall so far? And when you look at some of the players around them and like the lack of progression in their game this year, you're like, why did he fall so far? And I think
so Luca Pinelli was actually a guy that I did a profile on last year because he was listed in kind of I had a list of like the top 32 prospects that I took from like January or something. And then Pinelli was still on that list. So I did a profile on him and then he fell all the way to the 4th round. And I was like, oh, hey, I have a profile on this guy. I can refer back to that.
So. I remember this happening, actually. Yeah, he is... I'd say he's probably the easiest one to look at. But that being said, a lot of it kind of depends on how high you were on Gavin Brindley. Because, like, obviously, But I feel like that one doesn't really count as well just because, well, everybody kind of knows Gavin Brindley is sick.
Right.
I've seen Andrew Strothman a lot this year, actually. I've watched a lot of Youngstown, and he is definitely progressing in the way that he had to, which was not doing the most insane thing every time he had the puck, which was just like
very high chaos.
He still is very high chaos, but he's better high chaos, if that makes sense. Like, you don't want to take that element out of his game because that chaos is what makes Andrew Strothman the prospect you guys drafted. You remove that from him, what do you get? And like, are you really interested in that instead of like, at best, it would be like a replacement level guy you would waive if you like neutered the chaos in this game. Whereas if you keep it and then you get some physical skating development coaches with him, you might have something more. It's still a bit of a long shot, but he is still a really unique player. And he has this just, what is the word? Aura that NHL teams must like. Like, he must be so frightening to play against sometimes, just of how much of a beast he is. Like, there's been 3 games this year where I've watched a Youngstown player. Strothman was not the player in any of them, or at least the intended player. And something would happen. I don't know what, because the cameras cut on these shift by shifts too quickly for me to get like the full picture. And then the next is like roughly 2 minutes later, I see there's like 4 or 5 seconds left on a power play. And I'm like, is Andrew Strothman about to step out of the box? And then the penalty box opens and Strothman skates out. And it's like every time it's Strothman. It's like, I don't know if the Spidey senses are tingling or something like that, but it's like every single time it is Andrew Strothman. It's hilarious. He's a wild player to go up against. He will absolutely destroy an attacker who's not paying attention, and he thrives off of doing it. I will still never forget, and we'll bring it up every time Strothman gets brought up, especially to Columbus fans since they have both players. Strothman injuring Whitelaw with an insane hit at the Holinka camp
just accidentally murdering your own teammate. It's fine.
Yeah, like a year before they were both drafted to the same team. And they played for Youngstown together as well. That's the craziest part about it, is like he just didn't care. just hip checked him so hard when he tried to go around, and Whitelaw did a full 360 without ever touching the ice because of how hard he was launched. Like, Strothman's got something very interesting in his game.
Yeah, the Blue Jackets really love to do the buddy system draft recently, which is fun.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Do things that make players more comfortable. There's no disadvantage to it if the player, I mean, obviously don't take buddies' teammates just because, like, they're teammates. Like, make sure they're players you're interested in. But, like, it's not a bad idea. Fantilli and Brindley together was a genius thing to do. If you don't get Brindley because someone took him at like 27, then you don't get Gavin Brindley, and nobody's ever having this conversation. But, like, if he's there and you pass on him, I hope you pass on them for, like, the right player. It's rare, though. Like, and honestly, two of the only recent examples, Columbus took advantage of both Whitelaw and Strothman, and then Brindley and Fantilli, and in the same draft too. That's rare. That's really rare for it to happen once, let alone twice. But, like, it isn't a bad idea when you can do those types of things and make your players more comfortable and give them like someone internally within the system to drive them as competition and friendly rivalry and all this stuff. And, like, man, 3-4 years from now, that could be us out there. Like, those types of things. Like, yeah, I fully support that type of stuff. I think it's genius.
Yeah, it's great. If people want to learn more about Berkly Catton, if people want to learn more about the upcoming draft, because there's a lot of other exciting players to look at, where can people find your scouting work online?
You can find me at Sam_McGilligan on Twitter, and you can find me at sammcgilligan.substack.com if you want to read anything about rankings that I post. There will be something coming up at the end of the month. This year, it's a post a ranking update basically at the end of every month with a not absurdly long write-up, and just, like, see how it changes over the month. Basically what everyone else is doing, instead of the extremely long write-ups that no one probably finishes. You can also find our work at Puck Preps, a whole team doing players born between 2006 and 2009 right now. So NHL draft all the way down to the players who are eligible, not even the ones who are recently, but eligible for the CHL draft, upcoming OHL, QMJHL, and WHL drafts, and USHL. And you can also find my face beside Will Scouch's face on Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern when we do the Scouting Show live.
That's all I've got for you today. Tomorrow we are going to be previewing the game on Monday night, which I believe is against the Vegas Golden Knights, but don't quote me on that. Whatever the game on Monday is, we're going to be previewing that, and we'll have another draft profile coming in the evening as well. We're going to do some double episode days here because I have a ton of content that I want to get out to you guys. Thank you for listening to this one. Thank you for making us your first listener every day. Locked On Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms, as well as over on YouTube and on SiriusXM. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jacket. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.